I have here with me a huge honor to have Luke Meddings. Luke, thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you, Vicky.
You gave yesterday a concurrent keynote with Borchu Akio.
That's
Can
right.
you tell us a few things about it?
Sure. Well, the title of the keynote was Unplugged and Connected. And there's a sort of implied question mark, I guess, at the end of that. And it came out of a course that we ran together in Istanbul in December called Unplugged and Connected, on which we explored ways in which using Web 2.0 tools especially can support unplugged teaching, and ways in which the thinking behind dogma and teaching unplugged can ground our use of technology in the classroom.
So do you see a shift more towards not either dogma or connected, but like kind of a balance between the two?
Exactly. And I think what's been so interesting is the way that balance has emerged, to use a kind of dogma word, as educators have experimented in the classroom and found that 2.0 tools share many of the characteristics of unplugged teaching, because they're bottom-up, they're collaborative. There's a lot of emphasis in unplugged teaching on teaching at the point of need, and that fits so many of the things we do outside the classroom. You know, when we Google something, we expect to find an answer immediately. When we use Wikipedia, we move at our own speed between different sites, which themselves are collated in a collaborative way. So there are many parallels, and many educators have pointed this out before us in our own field, to say the least. People like Nick Robinson has spoken about this, people like Graham Stanley, Howard Vickers, Corinne Sylvester. We weren't by any means the first people to explore the connections or identify them. But I think what we wanted to do was, on a 3-day course, which is what we were able to do in December, to ask other people, participants, what do you think the potential is for mixing these ideas?
Okay, great. And through that course, how did the connected teachers respond to dogma, and how did the reverse happen?
That's so interesting. I'm trying to think back. It was very positive. It was very positive. And I don't think that we had anyone who came onto the course as a kind of defining themselves perhaps as an unplugged teacher, or defining themselves as a kind of a tech teacher. Because again, I think people are not defining themselves in those ways anymore. And I think the more people experiment in the classroom, the more they're finding that these tools fit the pedagogy, and that the pedagogy can ground the use of the tools. What was interesting, and in a way it was a relief to us, because I mentioned this implied question mark, unplugged and connected. Is there enough in common between these two approaches? It was very encouraging to see people find these connections, and there were lots of hands-on activities and lots of discussion. And we found, as we showed at the end of the talk yesterday, when we asked people to share their thoughts on where the common ground lay, there was a huge amount in common.
Oh, great. To those teachers who are watching this interview, what piece of advice would you give them when they're thinking, which one should I follow, what should I do?
In terms of which pedagogy to follow,
Yeah.
or which... Well, I mean, obviously, as somebody who's been involved in dogma ELT, I believe in lessons that are based on the lives and the language of the learner. And I would direct them to the book that I wrote with Scott Thornbury called Teaching Unplugged, if they haven't been exposed to many of these ideas, and to explore the continuing blogs that are being done on the subject. When it comes to Web 2.0 tools, I guess from my own perspective as a teacher who didn't grow up using technology in the classroom, or who grew up using much older technology, I would say don't be put off by the kind of 50 ways to use Skype type tweet. Don't think, how can I use Skype in 50 ways when I don't know how to use it once? In the same way, don't feel that there are so many tools to choose from that you can't make a choice. What Burju did in our talk and for the course was to select 3 tools, and she focused yesterday on Evernote and on Scoopit and on Linuit, and showed how those can be beneficial to educators in their own terms, but how they also support some of the principles of teaching unplugged. And also, I think, and this emerged almost from preparing the talk for our TEFL, in my own mind, how they can answer some of the key questions that arise from teaching unplugged. So when when we speak to colleagues during training courses, for example, when I'm training unplugged, one of the key questions has always been, how do you capture what happens in the unplugged classroom? If the role of the course book, which traditionally not just directs what happens, but is a kind of record of what will and has happened, if that role is diminished, then how do we cope with, how do we capture what's happening? How do we give students and ourselves as teachers a sense of a developing course over time? And tools like Evernote can do this, because we create and upload the content, and then that can help us to organise what's happening. I think it's a really powerful tool for unplugged teachers if the technology is in their environment to use.
That can be an issue too.
It can be an issue, and I still think one of the great strengths of teaching unplugged, the clue is in unplugged, is that it can be used without resources. It can be used in any educational environment, because the principle of teaching lessons based on the lives and the language of the learners is applicable in anywhere on earth. And so Evernote is great for collecting and making sense of what happens in class. Scoop It, I think, was a really interesting pick by Burcu, because it takes us into the area of curating content. And this also is a big question when people start to think about teaching unplugged, or have done it a little bit, is, okay, we're basing lessons on the lives of the language and the learners. There's lots of language, it's very interactive. But what about other kinds of texts? What about different text types, exemplifying other registers and so on? It can't all just be what we create in class. We need to have reference points, and we may need to be teaching specific syllabus items, academic language or language of journalism or whatever. The great thing about the internet is that there is now access to so many of us around the world, not everywhere, but increasingly to natural language use, be it newspapers or blogs or any kind of entertainment website, natural English use. The great thing about curation tools like Scoop It is that you can start to curate that content as a teacher, and you can involve learners in that curation process. So I think it provides a really interesting balance between self-created content, which is a big feature of unplugged teaching and learning, and also getting a real sense and examining and analysing different text types, and also looking at different experiences of the world. We've never said don't explore the world outside the classroom. What we say is start with us, the teacher, the learners, our environment, our local concerns, our personal concerns, and then move out from there.
Well, fantastic. It's been a great pleasure talking to you, Luke, as always. Thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you, Vicky.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.